Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today is going to be another weekly reading vlog. It is October, even though I am very hot in this short-sleeved shirt. Doesn't feel like October. It is October, officially spooky season, so we are going to be mood reading some horror this week. I have a lot of books that I want to get to, so many books, so little time. I've got some library and new releases that I could pick up that are pretty exciting. Some haunted house horror, some, I don't actually really know what this one is about, but I think it's like social media tech horror. And then we also have a haunted house horror where it's not like a haunted house you live in, but like a haunted house attraction. So one of these could be fun. I also just got my Aardvark box for October, and because they are celebrating an anniversary of theirs, they released an Aardvark exclusive. So this is a collection of horror short stories that you can only get through Aardvark. So of course I had to check it out. It's got some great authors, including Rachel Harrison, S.A. Barnes, Stephen Graham Jones. So I'm very excited to pick this one up. So this could definitely happen this week, maybe a couple short stories a day, something like that. But I did just start this morning while I was getting ready Senseless by Ronald Malfi. I am about 2% of the way into this one. I don't know a lot about it. It's Ronald Malfi's newest. I think it was on a list of recommendations that now that I've started to dive into the book, read the synopsis, I think what it was recommended for may be a little bit of a spoiler, so I'm not going to mention that. But this is a paranormal sort of detective story. We're following a detective, and I think we're going to follow a couple other points of view, but right now at the 2% mark, like I mentioned, I'm not far into it at all. We are following a detective who finds a dead body that is very similar, the MO of how this young woman was killed, very similar to something that happened about a year ago. However, the problem is he's already solved this case. The murderer has already been put away. I believe the murderer is actually deceased, so there's this problem of, is it a very good copycat with a lot of insider information, or is it something more sinister, like perhaps they got the wrong person in the first case, or is something a little bit more paranormal going on? I have heard really great things about this one, so I'm pretty excited to check it out. I read my first Ronald Malfi at the very beginning of this year, and I really had a lot of fun with it. It was a very big book, and I read it pretty much in one day because I was so absorbed. So I am excited to keep on reading from this author. So hopefully in my next update, I'll give maybe just a little bit more information than what I did here, because obviously I don't know a ton about this book yet, but I am very intrigued with what I've read so far. So those are the tentative reading plans for the week. I obviously have a lot that I want to get to. Who knows? I might get some more physical books from the library if my holds come in, might get some more books from Libby or something like that. You would never know. So hopefully this weekend it cools down a little bit. We can do something fun. Hopefully me and my partner are trying to find like a pumpkin patch or something like that. We come from Ohio, so we didn't always used to live in Arkansas where we live now. We come from Ohio, and corn mazes are a really big thing there, and we're learning, obviously, since not every state grows corn like the Midwest does, that's not a thing everywhere. So unfortunately we were hoping that we could find something similar. I don't think we're going to, so maybe just going to a pumpkin patch or something a little bit seasonal this weekend would be super fun, and I'm very excited for this week of reading. So I'm actually gonna go get to work and then get to reading, and I will check back in a little bit later with a reading update. So I am now about 50% of the way through Senseless, and overall I am enjoying this one. It does feel like it is 3 very distinctive stories, not just POVs, but stories. I know I can kind of get a sense for how eventually they will all connect together, but at this point in time, all 3 POVs that we're following do kind of feel like separate short stories, which is interesting, and 2 of them I'm enjoying, 1 of them not so much. Thankfully, that's the one we don't get too much of, but it's definitely the weak link in this story following 3 different people. So we start off this story with Detective Rennie, and at the very beginning he comes across a crime scene that is very eerily similar to a crime scene that happened a year before. Now, this is a problem for a lot of reasons. Number 1, because he thinks he's already solved that one, and he thinks that the case has been closed. So of course, when another body shows up pretty similar, there are some slight differences, but so much so where this is either the same killer or a copycat who was very close to the case and knew insider information that was not leaked to everyone. So that's very troubling for him, for his profession, and especially how he handled that last case. So he is trying to solve this new case, figure out who did it, if there is a connection to the case from a year prior, and he also has the husband of the woman who was killed a year prior trying to get involved with the investigation and trying to potentially get a new sense of justice for his wife's murder in case the cases are actually connected and the murder is still on the loose, and he's also grieving from the very sudden and tragic death of his wife. So he's got a lot going on, he's got a lot riding on solving this case, and as he dives deeper into the case, it brings up all of the issues and trauma surrounding that case from a year ago, and he starts to wonder if he's in a little over his head for a lot of different reasons. We're also following Maureen, who just got engaged to the love of her life. This whole story, by the way, takes place in California, in the Hollywood sort of region. So Maureen is not local to the area. She's not a Hollywood person. She's actually a writer. She's published 1 book, but she falls in love with a Hollywood executive, and they are going to get married. At her bridal shower, like their engagement celebration party, his son comes home, and this is something that causes a lot of tension for this couple and the son. The son is in his early 20s, very estranged from his father. His father had him with another woman, his first wife, and then he's now taking care of this son who is just not, they don't have the best relationship, and Maureen doesn't really know a lot about the son, so it is a surprise when he comes to visit them and stay with him. And as she interacts with him more and more, she starts to feel like it's not just animosity from a person who's getting a new mother figure. She thinks it's that at first, but as their interactions get more bizarre, more sinister, she starts to worry that there is something wrong with her husband's son, her new stepson to be, and that it could potentially be connected to some violent crimes in the area. We are also following Toby, who is just an interesting character. We haven't gotten as much from him as the other 2 characters, but his story is kind of all over the place. He's a very unreliable main character, and as he's describing himself and his upbringing and the things that he is trying to do to impress this woman, it's weird. He did not have the best home life. He grew up in an abusive situation, which kind of left a lot of marks on his psyche and the way he views the world and also himself. He was on the streets for a while, and then he meets this woman who he wants to do anything to impress. So all 3 of these stories are running concurrently with each other, and obviously, I mean, obviously maybe not, but they're all going to come together and kind of all interact by the end, I think. So overall, I am enjoying this one. It feels feels like a very easy book to fly through. I find that, at least with the other Ronald Malfi book that I've read, even though it was a very chunky book, it just felt like such a fast-paced and quick read because I was flying through the pages. Same thing with this one. I really like the blend of the horror genre with this kind of detective murder mystery happening, so definitely hoping for the next 50% to kind of have more of a love or enjoyment for Toby's sections. That's definitely, for me so far, the weak point of this story, because every time we get to a section I get disappointed that we're not following either of our other main characters. So I'm very curious as well to kind of see how all of these pieces fit together. So far so good. I'm enjoying it, and I don't have a lot on the docket today after work. Got a lot of reading time, so I'll probably end up finishing this one, and I will check back in tomorrow with another reading update. I finished Senseless, and unfortunately I did not love the ending of this one. I just thought the way that everything came together just wasn't my favorite. And I do want to make a correction to myself, because I noticed when I was logging this one, I actually have read more than one other Ronald Malfi before. So I read December Park at the beginning of this year. I actually read Small Town Horror in the very middle of last year, around July or August. Maybe you can already guess by the fact that I hadn't remembered initially that I had read it, that I felt very, very lukewarm about that one. And this one, I do think Small Town Horror is still my least favorite. However, I just did not love the way that this all came together. We got a lot more of Toby in the latter 50% of the book, and while I do understand like what he brings to the story, and like all three of these POVs are all intertwined in some way, I still didn't like his POV. And as we kept reading through his character, we kind of understood what was happening, and I was hoping maybe that there would be a twist, and it wasn't what was obviously being portrayed through his POV, and unfortunately there was no twist. That was just it. So I definitely think less is more with the Toby character, because the things that are revealed there, I just feel like a little bit more mystery would have made the book more compelling. And then I just ended up not loving Maureen's storyline and the way that wrapped up, but only because I felt like Maureen should have had her own story. Again, I understand how her story intersects with the other two. However, her story on its own could have been a standalone novel. The tensions that she was having with her husband-to-be and her soon-to-be stepson, like the tension there was really great. And I think that the secrets and the trying to figure out, like as she uncovers a lot of things, figuring out if it's her fiance or his son, a mix of both, who can she trust? I think that would have made for a great novel or novella on its own, but because it had to be in this same story as these other POVs, I just felt like the end really just wrapped up in a weird way. And because it had to kind of intersect with these others in such a specific way, I kept feeling like she was just making the stupidest decisions. And she was portrayed as a smart lady, a smart character, and she was most of the time, but unfortunately she would do decisions, make judgment calls that were bad purely because the story arc required her to do that to keep the story going. So I do think there was something very interesting there, especially at the beginning, but it should have been on its own and just had like a separate story for that. I think would have been a whole lot better. The detective point of view was my favorite, and we didn't get as much of him at the end, unfortunately. I just think maybe if this would have been told in more of a straightforward way, it would have been stronger, because the end, unfortunately, just didn't really do anything special. I will say I thought it was clever how instead of like a traditional villain monologue, the villain monologue was portrayed through a police interview. So the police had someone at the station and they were giving an interview and trying to get this person to confess, and the person did. And the way that kind of comes together. I thought that that was a lot more effective than just having the villain, for lack of a better word, monologue in a traditional sense. But at the same time, I just feel like there wasn't any twists, and there were a lot of little, like, they weren't even left plot lines. The plot lines were all technically resolved with a little bit of question at the end, but the way that the questions were left at the end, I don't mind an ambiguous ending, but I would have liked some more, not even answers, but some more clues, so I could have put together for the ambiguous things what I thought about them. And then just as well, like the way that Maureen's story ended, I don't think it worked tonally with the rest of this book. But the book's title is Senseless, and you know, the detective POV, I've seen some people kind of compare this to True Detective, I think is the name of the show, but it's a lot of senseless violence and kind of going through those kind of themes. So it was okay, and I don't think necessarily that a bad ending ruined the book experience, but it did take this book down from a very engaging read and a great book to just an okay middle of the road book for me. So I will still keep reading from this author. I think even out of the small town horror book that I didn't necessarily like, and the book, by the way, is called Small Town Horror. I'm not saying that like it's like the trope of a small town horror, even though it is. But even in that one, there were things that I really liked about the narrative, which obviously made me keep picking up this author's work. So I'm definitely not writing Malfi off for good, but just the ending of this one really bummed me out, as well as I just think I had a false sense of what this book was. I'm not going to give away what I thought it was because I still think it's kind of a spoiler, but also like thematically just not correct. But I saw it on a list of recommendations and I would not have put this book on that list. It didn't have anything to do with that really, in the way in which like it was kind of a part of it. I'm trying to be so vague, so I'm sorry if this doesn't make any sense, but it's kind of a part of it, but not a part of it where someone who's going to search out a list of that thing would like accept it as a good rec. It's not like what they would seek out this book for. Could I have put that in more of a confusing way? But this is definitely a horror thriller hybrid. I would say this fits very comfortably within, like, think Silence of the Lambs, where we have an FBI agent or a detective, and it does really lean into the horror aspects. It's a little bit darker than a traditional mystery, but it's very much rooted in reality for the most part. So yeah, interesting book overall. I am not quite sure what I want to pick up next, so you'll probably find out in the B-roll, but as of right now, I don't know what exactly I'm going to pick up, but it is going to be a horror. I'm still in the mood for horror. I have a lot of books that I'd like to get through in October. That's always the case. So many books, so little time. So I think off camera, I'll try and prioritize which ones that I really want to get to and then start one of those, but I will check back in with this vlog tomorrow with another reading update. So I found my next read and it's definitely perfect for October. I am currently reading The No End House by Jeremy Bates, and this one is definitely giving me very much October vibes. This one does take place in October, but because it does feature a haunted house slash escape room sort of kind of concept, it definitely feels like a Halloween specific read, and I'm having a fun time with it so far. So we are following main character Joe, and he is currently on a backpacking expedition around the world. He's doing this as a healing process to heal from the tragedy of losing his wife in a very horrific and grisly accident. He makes his way to Barcelona and he's enjoying the sights, enjoying being at a hostel and seeing all of the sights that Barcelona has to offer. He meets another traveler named Helen, and they get word of of a interesting attraction in downtown Barcelona in the Gothic historical district called the No End House. This is supposed to be a very scary, very frightening haunted house, and the kicker is the owner is offering thousands of dollars to anyone who can make their entire way through this house. So the pair decide to just go see what it is, check it out, see if this is actually a thing that is true, because that is a lot of money just for going through a haunted house. They arrive at this house, they hear the terms, and they come to the conclusion that they want to try and make their way through the No End House. They're offered $5,000 each if they can make it through each of this house's 9 rooms. So they accept based on the description and the terms and conditions. They assume this is going to be a mix between a haunted house and an escape room, and as they go into the first room, they think it's a creepy situation, but ultimately a fun game. But as they keep going through the different puzzles, the different challenges, they start to realize there are some very real and dark consequences that are happening based on whether or not they win or lose these challenges in this house. I am currently on chapter 7 and I am enjoying it. It's a very fast-paced read and it does read a little bit silly. And when I say silly, I don't mean like this is not cozy horror or anything. This is just regular horror, but it kind of feels like if you go to Tubi and then choose a movie that you've never heard before, and then you get this very interesting concept and it's like a very delightfully campy almost, but also gruesome B horror movie from like the 80s or the 70s. That's what this kind of feels like, because it is a little bit campy. You have to suspend your disbelief. I feel like Joe and Helen really just dive into this situation without thinking of any of the consequences, and their reactions I don't think are very realistic. I think most people would realize that they are in bad situation before these two characters do. So I think their reactions are a little bit cartoonish. They definitely feel like protagonists in a horror movie where you're just yelling at the screen being like, why are you doing this? Why are you going through these challenges? But that's part of the fun in a movie or a book like this one. So it's definitely a fun time, and we're supposed to get storms today. I'm actually filming this, I think, during the last couple of hours of light. I think in about an hour, we're supposed to start to get very heavy storms, potentially, gosh, I hope not tornadoes, but it is going to be a very gloomy and stormy day. So perfect to read this haunted house / escape room novel. So enjoying my time so far. I'm gonna go get to reading. I'll check back in later with an update. So I finished the No End House, and unfortunately, while I did like the beginning, this one drastically fell off for me in terms of plot, and then also just my enjoyment of this one really changed. And that's because I think this book really changed as well. It really changed the tone, and I didn't like that tonal shift. One of the pitches for this book is it's Saw meets Hostel, and if you've seen either of those movies and you go into this book expecting more of the same, you're going to be really disappointed. Those are very serious movies. Both of those movies take the subject matter a lot more seriously. Neither of them could be considered horror comedies in any sense of the word, and this one got very silly in a strange way that I didn't appreciate, especially because this was built up as being just a little bit more on the serious side. So in the titular No End House, we have 9 different rooms that our characters are supposed to complete the challenges and get through. The first 3 I thought were really well done. I thought there were some really creepy concepts introduced in them, and then we got to room 4 and it very sharply took a turn for more of like a fantasy sort of sci-fi story, which again, comparing this to Saw and Hostel, those are both very much like rooted in reality. I mean, you do have to suspend your disbelief obviously with some elements, but they're very much rooted in reality, kind of gritty, especially the first Saw, more of like a dark mystery. And this one just got so so incredibly goofy, but I could not tell from reading this book, I couldn't tell if the author wanted us to take all of this very seriously or have more of a fun time with this, because the tone just kept changing to me. And I think in part because the characterization, the main characters were very weak. Their conversations with each other were really weird and they weren't very likable. They continued to not be likable characters at all, so it was hard to root for them to succeed throughout this house. And I definitely compare it to a B horror movie where we have just a bunch of really annoying characters, maybe a slasher where you don't really care whether or not some of them live or die. But I didn't love the turns that this book took, and it went off in a weird direction. There were some weird language decisions in here and some attempts at like very edgy humor that just really fell flat. I felt like this book came out this year, and if you told me it would have come out in like 2002, I would have believed you, because it did feel very dated with the attitudes of the main characters and the way they interacted with each other and made jokes at the expense of other people or talked about other people. It felt really dated, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was very well written. And while in the beginning I was comparing it to a Tubi movie where you put on and you have a fun time with it because maybe it's not technically the best, but it's still a fun B-movie horror time, I'd say by the end this just turns into, again, a Tubi movie where you put it on but you've never heard of it before. But it definitely feels like a movie, or rather a book, at the end where you're like, wow, I understand the concept. It was a cool concept, but it just really fell flat in all aspects for me. So unfortunately, I really didn't love the way that this one turned. And I know I'm not the only one, because when I checked the ratings for this book, it has very low average ratings, which does not usually scare me away from a horror. However, looking at Storygraph, looking at all of the people who DNF'd around the same point in time in the book, and I know exactly which point in the book that it was, I think that I'm not the only person who just felt such a weird, strange tonal shift from a more serious sort of horror to just a very bizarre, very goofy fantasy sci-fi time. So unfortunately, this one missed the mark, and I'm kind of disappointed in my reading experience. It's definitely going to be memorable just in the fact that it really had a great concept. I loved the idea of a haunted house that turns out to be a lot more higher stakes than a traditional haunted house or escape room, and unfortunately it didn't work for me. So that's a bummer. Moving on to the next book, I think I'm going to pick up The Farmhouse by Chelsea Conradt, and this one is about a couple who moves into a haunted house in the middle of nowhere. They're from California, they're moving to Nebraska. It's a very big shift for them, and weird things start happening in the house. It's a very basic setup, but I think a very basic classic setup is what I need to kind of get out of the rut of the strangeness, which was the last book I read. So I do think I am going to dive into this one next, and I will check back in a little bit later, tomorrow probably, with another reading update. My fall Evernight package just came in the mail, so let's unbox that together. I already cut the tape off, so you don't have to hear me fiddling with that too much. Let's open it up. I do know what the book is, so I'm excited to see kind of the art style. So let's open her up. Okay, this cover is very, very different than the original, and I kind of love it. The original, I will pop up a picture on the right hand side of the screen. It's very simplistic. It's nice, it's neat, it's clean. It does have sort of a retro style typography on it, but because this is about the artwork for the special edition, I do like that it's been very heavily reimagined. So yeah, that's the front cover. We've got the back cover with that foiling, and then let's move this box out of the way so that we can just crack this book open. I am a little nervous about reading this one because I have heard that it is just so intense with the body horror and other themes. So it's alien horror, and it's about a trans man who is in this like alien sort of hive mind cult, gets impregnated, which obviously causes a lot of body dysphoria for him, and the cult won't let him get rid of it. So that is obviously going to be very difficult to read, and I've just heard that the body horror in this is gnarly and a lot. So I don't know when I'm gonna get to this one. I am excited to try it, but I have heard that it is a lot. So here is the author's note, and there's a lot of, I know there's a lot of really big triggers for people, so screenshot that if you're interested. I have heard that it is very excellently done, but just based on this and the body horror, and it is compared to Alien too, so I think this is going to be very gruesome, but I'm excited to try out something from this author. It is this author's adult debut, so yeah, pretty excited about this one, very cautiously excited about this one. A couple of days have passed and I do have a couple of reading updates for y'all. So yesterday I got my Nightworms September, October, I forget which month, but the fall book in the mail, and I was really excited to get to this one. I have been hearing great things. I've been hearing horrible things, not necessarily horrible in terms of this is a bad book, but horrible in terms of this is a very horrifying book. So I'm a little intimidated by the amount of body horror and gore that's supposed to be in this one, and I can't remember if I actually said what book this was in my unboxing, so I was so excited just to look at this cover. But it's You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White, and this cover is quite a departure from the original. I did show that comparison. I didn't actually show the naked hardback, so I'm going to show it really quickly here because it is quite gorgeous in a very horrifying way. So there we go. We got the naked hardback there with some horrifying imagery. One thing I like about the Evernight package is that all of the stylistic components, so the end pages, the naked hardback, all of that very much fit in with scenes from the novel. It's clear that if the artists haven't read the book, then they get a lot of notes from someone who has to really make a masterpiece. So pretty excited to get to this one. Don't know when I'll get to it, but eventually. Secondly, last I talked to you, I was going to start The Farmhouse by Chelsea Conradt, and I got about 125 pages into this one, and I was not liking it. I was not liking it at all, and this one is very chunky. It's about 400 pages, and because I had just read The No End House, and that was a disappointment, and we are in October, which is peak spooky season, I just felt like, why read a book that is not going to be, it's going to be middle of the road or below. I was not getting great vibes from this one. I wasn't really enjoying the reading experience. It's about a couple who moves into a farmhouse and weird things start happening. The wife starts seeing things, the husband doesn't. It's just a very classic setup, and this one wasn't really doing anything to kind of reinvent the wheel. Not all books need to. Sometimes I do like a very classic tropey haunted house horror. Darcy Coates is really good at this, but just the writing style and the very grating nature of the protagonist, this just really wasn't working for me. I don't like in books, well, I usually like in books when we get like a sense of place and time. I don't mind a reference or two here and there because it's especially fun reading older books, seeing those references and being able to be immersed. But this is the kind of book where I understand why people don't like references to pop culture. It was just all over the place. In particular with slang, there was a lot of the main character saying like, I can't effing deal with this, and she wouldn't say the F word, she'd say EFFING, or this is so effing scary, and other curse words were used in here, so I don't really know why that one was off the table or why it had to be said in that way. I would rather the main character say something like that was really horrifically scary than that was so effing scary. That's not good writing to me. There was also just a lot of slang like adulting, I did a thing, things like that just didn't really work for this one, as well as the main character would very occasionally speak to the reader in a very conversational way that I didn't like. So this one is just not going to be for me. It's not a horrible book, just not a book I want to spend my time with in October. So I DNF'd that one, and then I ended up picking up Willow's Point, The Complete Haunting by Richard and W.H. Chizmar, and this is a father and son duo. I've read from Richard Chizmar before. I've not read from his son, so pretty excited about this one. I'm about 25% of the way through this one, and this is a purely epistolary novel, and I love that. I love that setup. This is a found footage book. It's told primarily through camera footage, audio footage, things like that, and then we also get things like newspaper reports, descriptions of TV shows, things like that coming together in an epistolary novel to make this feel like a found footage film. And it's featured Widow's Point, which is a lighthouse on the eastern coast of the United States. It has a horrific, tragic past, and the first part of this book, we were in 2017, and we followed this man who made his living writing nonfiction books about the paranormal, traveling to places. He spends a full weekend locked in this lighthouse, and he is narrating his experiences. We get to see his camera footage, his audio footage, and the aftermath of that, and that was really interesting. And I just got to, right before this update, in fact, I got to the 2025 part, which I think is going to be the majority, the bulk of this book, where we have a team of investigators investigating what happened to this man at this lighthouse, and then just also exploring the lighthouse to get some evidence of the paranormal. So I'm enjoying this one. This feels definitely like a fun October read. I love a found footage horror movie, and I really love shows like Ghost Adventures. They're very fun to me. They are definitely a guilty pleasure, and I watch them more for entertainment value rather than wanting to see like evidence of the paranormal. If I want that, I'm not going to shows like that, but I do really love that concept. I think it's very fun. Found footage movies as well. This is really combining a lot of elements in horror or horror/paranormal adjacent media that I love. So I'm having a good time with this one so far. I'm gonna get to reading. I think this is going to be especially creepy to read once it gets dark outside, because I have a digital copy of this one checked out from the library. So I think it could be a really fun read to read when all of the lights are out. So I'm gonna keep reading this one. I'll check back in tomorrow with an update. So I finished Widow's Point, The Complete Haunting, and I did really enjoy this one overall. I will say, because of the epistolary manner of this one, and because so many of those elements are video or audio recordings, I do think that this has the chance to be a really well done audiobook. So even though I didn't read this book in that format, I might suggest the audiobook over the physical or ebook, just because my biggest thing that was hard to get into this one, I got used to it as time went on, is that the writing style is very different because it's so dependent on it being a found footage horror. So some of the things, like the writing style, it's obviously not going to be very internally monologue focused or a lot of really descriptive prose, because it's just conveying what you, the watcher or the reader, can see on various video or even audio tapes. Ultimately, I don't think it detracts from the book in any way, but it was something to get used to. So like I mentioned last time, this book is split up into two different parts, and I actually learned that the first part, the 2017 part, was actually its own complete novella. It had a very limited run, and then Richard and his son WH, they were kind of collabing together. They both realized that they had a lot more to say about this lighthouse, about this story, which is how the 2025 perspective came in, and rather than just publishing published that as a sequel. They combined it all together and I think made some additions to the 2017 timeline to really bring this all to a full circle story, and I am very glad for that because it looks like the 2017 version, or the original version, the novella version of this one, is very, very hard to find. So I am glad that they decided on that route, and I will say I think the 2025 portion is a whole lot stronger just because the original portion has one investigator at this lighthouse. The 2025 portion has a whole team, so that really makes the book work a little bit better in terms of team dynamics and pushing the plot along. I will say, for better or for worse, I don't mind. I'm a found footage lover, but this does really feel like a found footage movie in terms of pacing. I feel like a lot of found footage movies are known for having very slow starts, and you kind of have to set up why the characters are filming everything and the way that they're filming. So there was quite a bit of setup for both of these main stories within this story, but I really enjoyed how everything kind of came together and how we had time to really dive in and explore this house. There are definitely going to be some moments where there are some false jump scares, much like a horror movie where we have characters pranking each other, or something, you know, the equivalent of a bird flying into a window in a horror movie where it kind of prepares you to be scared and then it's nothing and then it keeps ramping up after that. So overall, I had a fun time with this one. It takes place the week of Halloween, and just because of that and the fun found footage element, this also has homages to a lot of different found footage horror films. So I think this would be a good one to pick up during the month of October, but most specifically the week of Halloween. So there you have it. That is going to be the end of this vlog. Definitely kind of a mixed bag. I would say my two favorite books that I read for this vlog would be Senseless by Ronald Malfi. I did enjoy this one overall. Didn't love the way it ended, but honestly, endings don't make or break a book for me, so I enjoyed most of the ride of this one. And of course, the last book I just read, the Chizmar's book, Widow's Point, The Complete Haunting. I enjoyed that overall as well. I think it's a great Halloween time read. So thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my content. Stay safe, stay spooky, happy Halloween, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!